The last pair of chromosomes in the human karyotype are called gonosomes, or sex chromosomes, as they are involved in sex determination. In men, this pair consists of an X chromosome and a non-homologous Y chromosome, and in women, the pair consists of two homologous X chromosomes. The gonosomes also carry genes unrelated to sex determination, known as sex-linked genes. Abnormalities or disorders in these sex-linked genes can lead to sex-linked disorders like, for example, hemophilia or color blindness. Because the Y chromosome is much smaller than the X chromosome, it carries far fewer genes. So more often than not, sex-linked disorders occur on the larger X chromosome. X-linked disorders can be caused by either a dominant or a recessive allele, but in this video we'll focus on recessive alleles.
So an X-linked recessive disorder is caused by a recessive allele that is carried on or is linked to the X chromosome only. When we write this out, we use a lowercase letter, for example a D, written next to the X chromosome. The lowercase letter is written as a superscript to show that it is linked to or carried exclusively on the X chromosome.
It's very important that learners stick to the annotation given in an exam question and do not make up their own letters to represent alleles. Read the stem of a question carefully, as that will tell you what type of trait or disorder you are dealing with.
Because the scientific name for color blindness is daltonism, we will use an uppercase and lowercase letter D to represent the allele. An X chromosome with a lowercase letter D linked to it represents the recessive colorblind allele, and an X chromosome with an uppercase letter D linked to it represents the dominant healthy allele. Now remember from our previous video on complete dominance that a recessive trait will only be expressed in the phenotype if an individual carries two copies for it. In other words, both homologous chromosomes carry the recessive allele. Sex-linked disorders occur more often in males than in females, as males have only one X chromosome. Here you can see that if the X chromosome has a dominant normal allele linked to it, the male will be unaffected by color blindness. But if the X chromosome has a recessive allele linked to it, the male will be colorblind. So if an abnormal allele, even if it is recessive, occurs on the X chromosome of the male, that characteristic will form part of his phenotype, and he will suffer from the genetic disorder. He has no other X chromosome that may carry a normal allele to mask or hide the abnormal one. However, females have an extra X chromosome that can help mask X-linked recessive disorders. Here you can see that an unaffected normal female can occur in two ways. Either she has two dominant alleles linked to her X chromosomes, or she carries an abnormal recessive allele on one X chromosome, while the other X chromosome carries a normal dominant allele. This normal dominant allele will mask the abnormal recessive allele, and she will not suffer from the genetic disorder. She is known as a genetic carrier.
Although a female may be a genetic carrier for an X-linked recessive disorder, she is phenotypically normal or unaffected. So when you have to describe the phenotype of a female like that in an exam, do not say carrier female or genetic carrier. Say unaffected female or normal female. And it's important to include the word female in your description of the phenotype, as this is an X-linked recessive disorder, so it's related to the sex of the individual.
The last possible allele combination in females is carrying two recessive alleles, one linked to each X chromosome. This is the only state in which a female will express an X-linked recessive disorder in her phenotype, for example being colorblind.
So remember that in a female, for her to express a X-linked recessive disorder in her phenotype, both of her X chromosomes have to carry a recessive allele. Whereas in males who only have one X chromosome, they only need one recessive allele on that X chromosome to express the disorder in their phenotype. Therefore, there is a much smaller chance for females to actually have X-linked recessive disorders.
So here we have all the genotypes and phenotypes for the X-linked recessive disorder color blindness. Notice that the only genotypes where there may be some uncertainty is when the phenotype of the female is unaffected or normal. For all the other phenotypes, the genotypes are known, and this makes it easy to analyze pedigree diagrams on X-linked recessive disorders.
Now let's analyze a pedigree diagram that shows the inheritance of an X-linked recessive disorder.
Here we can see the inheritance of color blindness over 3 generations in a family. Remember that we number or name the individuals in a pedigree diagram to make it easier to refer to them later. The key shows us that unaffected males and females are indicated by unshaded squares and circles. Affected colorblind males and females are indicated by shaded squares and circles. The first step is to identify all the colorblind males. This includes males 3, 5, and 6. We start with the colorblind males because they only have one X chromosome. So to be colorblind, their only X chromosome must carry the recessive colorblind allele. Therefore, the genotype must be XD, Fill these genotypes in on your pedigree diagram. Step 2 involves identifying all the unaffected normal males. This includes males 1 and 9. We make this our second step because, once again, males only have one X chromosome. So to be unaffected and normal, their only X chromosome must carry the dominant normal allele. Therefore, the genotype must be XD. And we fill these genotypes in on our pedigree diagram. Step 3 is to identify all the colorblind females, and this includes only female 8. We make this our third step because females have two X chromosomes. So to be colorblind, both their X chromosomes must carry the recessive colorblind allele. Therefore, the genotype must be XD, XD. And we fill these genotypes in on our pedigree diagram.
Now all the known genotypes have been filled in on our pedigree diagram. The only ones that remain are those of the unaffected normal females. But such a female could be homo or heterozygous. So how do we continue?
You start by identifying all the unaffected normal females that had colorblind sons. This includes female 2, who had a colorblind son number 3, and female 4, who had a colorblind son number 6.
But why would knowing the genotypes and phenotypes of the sons help us to determine that of their parents?
So here it's important to remember that during sex determination, offspring inherit one gonosome and its linked genes from each parent. Males have an XY gonosome pair, so during gamete formation they produce 50% X carrying sperm and 50% Y carrying sperm. Females have an XX gonosome pair, so all of the ova they produce will only ever carry an X chromosome. During fertilization, if a Y-carrying sperm fertilizes an X-carrying ovum, the resulting child will be a male. So sons inherit their Y chromosome from their father and their X chromosome from their mother. But if an X-carrying sperm fertilizes an X-carrying ovum, the resulting child will be a female. So daughters inherit one X chromosome from their father and the other X chromosome from their mother. So looking back at our pedigree diagram, colorblind son number 3 inherited his Y chromosome from his father and his X-linked recessive allele for colorblindness from his mother. As his mother, number 2, is phenotypically unaffected and normal, this indicates that she has at least one X chromosome that carries the dominant normal allele. Therefore, she must be heterozygous and a genetic carrier for colorblindness. The same logic applies for female 4. Her colorblind son, number 6, inherited his Y chromosome from his father, number 5, and his X-linked recessive allele for colorblindness from her. But because she is phenotypically unaffected and normal, we know that her genotype is heterozygous and that she is a genetic carrier for colorblindness. Also notice that the same logic applies to daughters. Daughter number 8 is colorblind. This means that she inherited two X chromosomes, one from each parent, that carried the X-linked recessive disorder. Because her father, number 5, only has one X chromosome, he must therefore be colorblind. The last step is to identify all the remaining unaffected normal females, and this includes only female number 7. Do this by drawing Punnett squares to determine all the possible genotypes that could result from the parents. Here we can see the possible genotypes of the offspring for parents number 4 and 5. As their daughter, number 7, is phenotypically unaffected and normal, the only possible genotype that could cause this phenotype is XD, X d. So female 7 must be heterozygous and a genetic carrier for color blindness. She inherited her dominant allele from her unaffected mother and the recessive allele from her colorblind father.
So there we have the final complete pedigree diagram for the inheritance of color blindness in this particular family. Now it will be much easier to answer questions on this pedigree diagram.
To analyze a pedigree diagram with an X-linked recessive disorder, first identify all the colorblind males, then the unaffected normal males. Then identify the colorblind females, and then the unaffected normal females with colorblind sons. Lastly, identify the remaining unaffected normal females. Here are some key takeaways from this video. Males have only one X chromosome, so any defective allele linked to it will be expressed in their phenotype. An affected male's genotype is therefore known. Females have two X chromosomes. For the recessive disorder to be expressed in their phenotype, both X chromosomes must carry the defective allele. An affected female's genotype is therefore known. Males inherit their X chromosome from their mother and their Y chromosome from their father. Therefore, if a son is colorblind and his mother has a normal phenotype, she must be a genetic carrier for color blindness. Females inherit one X chromosome from their mother and one X chromosome from their father. Therefore, if a daughter is colorblind, her father will also be colorblind, and her mother will carry at least one recessive allele for color blindness.
If you found this video useful, give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new episodes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook to stay on top of the latest TAS news and launches. So that's it for now from the Answer Series, your key to exam success.